Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first Automotive Logistics Supply Chain Conference. My name's Louis Yakumi. I'm the publisher of the Automotive Logistics Group, publishers of Automotive Logistics and Finished Vehicle Logistics magazines, and organisers of the Automotive Logistics Global series of conferences that take place in Europe, China, Mexico, Russia, Brazil, UK, India, and we also have 4 conferences and events in the United States. This is our first Automotive Logistics Supply Chain Conference, and we brought it to a new location for us. Why Atlanta? When I was thinking, where should we have this conference, I had Georgia on my mind. So I took the midnight train to Georgia. Okay, I think that's enough of those kind of jokes now. But we're honoured and really delighted to be here in Georgia and in Atlanta. And I'd just like to ask Tom Croteau, the Deputy Commissioner of Global Commerce for the Georgia Department of Economic Development, just to make some welcoming remarks to welcome us to Georgia. Tom.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you, panel, for starting the clapping. I really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. All right, very good. Everybody is awake. So on behalf of Georgia Governor Nathan Deal, on behalf of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, welcome to Atlanta, welcome to Georgia, and welcome to your Automotive Logistics Supply Chain Conference. We are so pleased that you have chosen Atlanta for this conference this year, and I am told next year as well. Is that right, Louis? Very good. We are honored to host this conference, and I am your official welcome. So I will try and be brief so that we can get the program going. And I have to say, what a fitting place for a logistics conference here in Atlanta, and especially for the automotive industry. And allow me to share with you just a few local logistics factoids for where you are sitting, for where we are for this conference. Of course, many of you will have traveled flying into Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the world's most well-traveled airport. With 100 million passengers each year, this used to be known as the world's busiest airport, but then the marketing folks decided that busy was not such a great word when you think about airports and security lines and flying. So we've become the world's most well-traveled airport. Beijing, by the way, is a not too close second with 89 million passengers, but they're trying hard to catch Atlanta, and we know that the Chinese are so good at copying things, so we're keeping on our toes. A couple of more factoids. With more than 3,600,000 containers, the Port of Savannah is the 4th largest container port in the country, behind only Los Angeles, Long Beach, and the combined ports of New York and New Jersey. It is the fastest growing port in the nation, and it's also the single largest terminal in terms of contiguous acreage among ports, but really, you know, regardless of size and those statistics, the Port of Savannah is a port that is focused on efficiency, on low unionization rates, things like being open on Saturdays, having access for clients on 7 days a week. But the other big thing that's going on at the port that you may have heard about is there's a little dredging project going on to the tune of over $700 million that is dredging an area on the outside harbor over 18.5 miles of dredging for to take the depths to 49 feet, and then the entire river channel to take the depths to 47 feet at low tide to accommodate post-Panamax ships, of course. And then down the road, the Port of Brunswick has now become the second busiest auto port, handling vehicle imports and exports for more than 30 auto and heavy equipment manufacturers. Last year, the Port of Brunswick moved more than 680,000 vehicle units of ro-ro cargo. So a lot going on in our ports. And of course, most of you probably know that Atlanta was founded as a railroad hub. So a city that initially or originally was called Terminus because it was the terminating point for two railroads, east-west and north-south. Today has become one of certainly the largest railroad hub in the southeast, with more than 4,600 miles of track, and has the largest intermodal facility on the East Coast as well. And interestingly, there's a new inland port in Georgia that is in the process of being constructed and opened. So the inland port that will be in the northeast part of the state, that will serve North Georgia, will serve Tennessee, and will serve Alabama as well. And so it will provide a direct rail connection to the Port of Savannah, direct 388-mile route to the Port of Savannah, and that will help not only industries to get products to the port fast, but it will also take thousands of trucks off the road in Atlanta over the next couple of years. And that is scheduled to open at the end of 2018 or the beginning of 2019. But beyond logistics, Georgia is also a center of gravity for the automotive industry. So of course, our flagship for the automotive industry is Kia's only U.S. manufacturing plant, which produces about 380,000 cars a year in West Point, Georgia. They build the Kia Optima, they build the Kia Sorento, and they also build the Hyundai Sonata there in West Point. Bluebird Bus Company has their headquarters and manufacturing operation in Fort Valley, Georgia as well. And then there are major manufacturing operations for Honda Lock, Honda Transmission, Toyota Denso, Toyota Industries, and Decostar Magna. But really, the interesting thing is what we have seen over the past couple of years in terms of the growth of suppliers that have come to support and supply all of the, especially foreign OEMs that have located all around us. And we've had so many that have popped up in the northern part of the state, on the western part of the state, to support Kia as well. So companies like Enalfa, Yachiyo, Voestalpine, KTW, Kumho, Herring, Lindy Veeman, Pirelli Tire, Mondo, and many others that really just in the past couple of years have put a new facility in Georgia. It's been really exciting for us to see. Excuse me, one moment. All right, I have my Marco Rubio moment there. But let's not forget the North American headquarter operations that we are seeing come this way as well. So Mercedes-Benz USA, Porsche North America, and more recently, Kumho has moved their headquarters from California to Atlanta as well. So we think there's something really different going on here. And it's not about, we're in a place in the South where the South is known, of course, for a business-friendly environment and low land costs and low unionization rates and those types of things, good incentives, But I think there's something that's much more special that's going on here, because these days, in this day and age, everything has become about innovation, right? About collaboration, about the Internet of Things, about customer experience, about software-driven solutions. And this is where Atlanta is really setting itself apart with innovation centers that at what is a couple of blocks away at Tech Square on Georgia Tech's East Campus, with companies like Panasonic, with AT&T Drive Studio, Microsoft, ThyssenKrupp, GDEcD, and more than a dozen other companies that have opened innovation centers there on Georgia Tech's campus to take advantage of, yes, the talent, but much more than the talent, to take advantage of the creativity, the imagination, the coding, the engineering, the product fusion, the hackathons that we are seeing, the robot battles, the millennial innovation. And speaking of innovation, we have our own Georgia Center of Innovation for Logistics located at the Department of Economic Development there on Georgia Tech's campus, and you're going to hear more about that in the panel discussion. But Janine Miller, if you'll give us a wave, Janine, is our director for our Center of Innovation for Logistics. Janine just had her own logistics summit in April. That's an annual summit that draws more than 2,000 people from around the nation and indeed from around the globe. So look us up for that next year. Maybe you can combine a couple of back-to-back trips. So while you're here, please visit the world's largest aquarium, go to CNN, visit the World of Coke. I understand that you're having a reception at the World of Coke, which is really tremendous, tremendous thing that you will enjoy. The Center for Civil and Human Rights is right there. Ride the Ferris wheel. All of these things that I mentioned are all within a 2-block area in the Olympic Park down the road. Come and have a hot dog at the famous Varsity Cafe that's close by. If you are a college football fan, then you definitely want to hit the College Football Hall of Fame, but you need to have 2 hours. I promise you, if you like college football, you will love that Hall of Fame. It's really a remarkable thing, and it just came online about a year ago. Or come see us at Tech Square, and you might get pulled into a game of cornhole, you might get pulled into a hacky sack circle, or you might get pulled into a hackathon or a robot battle, I don't know. But whatever you decide to do, please enjoy yourself while you are here, and please come back and see us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Unfortunately, Tom has to leave us now, but there will be members of the team from the Georgia Economic Development Corporation if you want to hear more about what they're doing here and what they offer here. So we just heard some of the advantages of why we brought the conference to Georgia, to Atlanta, and why this new event. Some of you will know that we organize a finished vehicle logistics conference in North America, in California. It's actually in a couple of weeks. And it's proved very successful. People who attend tell me that they like being in an event where it's very focused, it's specifically on their area. Whoever they talk to or network with or sit next to at lunch is relevant for them in some kind of way. So we got a lot of requests when people went back to their main offices. I got requests from the other side of the industry saying, we want one of those. We want one of those on parts. So that's why, so at the request of the car makers really and the part suppliers, that's the reason we put this new event together. Also wanted to bring in a little bit more about service parts and after sales. So we're going to be doing that in our conferences globally. But we've got a great session on the after sales and service parts supply chain later on today, and it'll be something that we're discussing over the 2 days. And last but not least, this year I've been spending a little bit more time in the office, and I think everybody wanted me out of the office again. So this is one of 11 automotive logistic events that we're holding in 2016, so I think they just wanted to get me out. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, our premier sponsor, Ryder, who have been our partners at our event since our very first event in the year 2000, which was in Chicago. Our gold sponsors, ProTrans and Sergere. Our global sponsors, Beijing Changju Logistics, CDC Logistics, who are our first China-based global sponsor. And CHEP, another global sponsor of ours. They're called global sponsors because they sponsor all of our events around the world. And our silver sponsors, CNW, ProAct, Schnelliker, and Syncreon. They sponsor this conference because they've got knowledge or products or services that are ideal for you, for your industry. So please visit their stands, read their literature, and meet their people. We've got a great 2 days lined up for you, from the first session looking at what our industry might look like in the future, to the think tanks and the final high-level discussion panel at the end of the conference tomorrow. So please don't plan on leaving early. Our gala dinner tonight, hosted by our premier sponsors, Ryder, will take place at Coca-Cola World, and we'll have a guest presentation from the VP of Logistics from Coca-Cola. And after that, there'll be an afterglow reception nearby, hosted by Sergere. This conference is also part of the Automotive Logistics Live program, which means that the conference is being streamed live around the world. So if you see me fixing my tires, straightening my badge, or fixing my hairstyle a little bit, it probably means my wife is watching and messaging me. To use the live app, you can use the Wi-Fi, which is sponsored by ProTrans, and you can see details on the screen. And there's more information in the printed program on the inside back cover of the printed program. Please log on and use the live app, because it's a very useful tool. You can ask questions or make comments that others in the audience will see, but will also be seen by the moderators, who can then ask the question on your behalf. You can interact with other delegates and send direct messages to other delegates who are here. And you can participate in the voting surveys that we'll have this afternoon. So it's a very useful tool and very worth just logging onto and being a part of the whole event. I decided earlier in the year that 2016 will be the year of the fun conferences. I announced this in our Europe conference, and it really was a great and fun event. It's somehow people kind of got into that. For the China conference, which was next, I Google translated fun conference, announced it to everyone, and to my dismay, it later turned out that the translation actually meant interesting meeting, which wasn't quite what I was intending to get across. But for this conference, I don't think I need to label it. After the conference, after the cocktail reception last night with you guys, I think this is going to be a fun conference, whatever I call it, or whether I like it or not. But I hope we can combine the two, and it'll be an interesting meeting and great fun. And I don't know if it's because it's Atlanta, I'm getting the vibe of the kind of the southern feel and the music. It could be that, but I've got to say, and I hope you do too, that this morning I've got to say, I feel good. And on that note, I'd also like to thank the Women's Psychiatric Association that have got a conference just on the other side of the hall there. I'd like to thank them for sharing some of their chemicals with me this morning. I didn't appreciate the electric shock treatment so much, but still it seemed to have worked. So I hope we have a great 2 days and you enjoy the conference, and we're very lucky to have a great start to the conference as well. We're going to be looking a little bit forward in this session with projections and forecasts, how, if that's possible for this crazy automotive industry that we're in, and also looking at what logistics might look like in the future. So we've got a great panelist to try and do that for us. But the first speaker of the morning, I'd like to welcome to the podium Brandon Mason, the leader of Autofacts Americas from PwC. Thank you, Brandon.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you that have seen me, oh, thanks, Louis. I don't want your germs. Yeah. For those of you that have heard or seen me speak before, I often come up here and talk about the industry, and I get asked pretty much the same three questions all the time, right? What's your U.S. sales forecast for this year? When's the next economic downturn? And how long until autonomous vehicles rule the road? Okay? So our forecast is 17.8. Autonomous vehicles, we don't know. And the next downturn is 2018. All right, I'm done. I'll see it. No, there's actually a little bit more going on in the industry than just that. So I'm going to attempt in the next 20 minutes or so to walk you through some of the things that are top of mind for us, and hopefully that will stimulate some discussion during the panel or throughout the day. So let us start with global and our global outlook. There are, and this will sort of bookend my comments today around the changing face of the industry as we shift towards an alternative mobility model. So there are those that are out there that say the end is near for the auto industry, that we are reaching max production, and because of these alternative models, so car sharing, ride sharing, autonomous vehicles, greater use of mass transit, the Hyperloop, right? That production is nearing the end and we'll start to see a steep decline. Our current forecast that we published goes out to 2022. That top line is around 110 million units. So we're actually seeing about the same amount of growth from the last 5 years that we're going to see in the next 5 years. So it's actually a good sign. Steady growth driving the top line upwards. At some point, we may reach critical mass. But in the near term, let's call it near to midterm, we just don't see that happening. A lot of that is being driven by growth in emerging markets, which I'll get to in a moment. But I want everybody in this room to rest assured or be reasonably assured that we still see the automotive top line continuing to forge ahead. China is obviously a big driver of that forecasted growth. And last year there was a lot of concern around the Chinese market and the ripple effects that some less than stellar economic numbers that came out of there, that the impact that they had on the global financial markets. So I think that was the first and second quarter of last year. Sales also started to take a plunge, but China took pretty impressive measures to make sure that they still saw continued sales growth in the market. Some of those were a devaluing of their currency not once but twice, a 50% reduction in the value-added tax on small displacement engines. They got rid of the one-child policy meant to stimulate growth, and they eased a number of lending practices to make loans easier for consumers. And it worked. The year finished very strong. I think we ended up 6 or 7% growth. I think that the message I want to convey with China is that we sort of have to get used to the new normal, right? We're not going to have double-digit GDP growth. We're not going to have double-digit sales growth every year in China. And I think once the markets started to realize that, they've calmed down and realized, okay, this is still a very popular, very high growth market. In fact, we still see China as a 30 million unit market by the end of the decade. So that's going to drive, the bulk of our automotive assembly growth. And so the government set the new 5-year plan, and so the new GDP target for the next 5 years is 6.5%. Which seems relatively easy to be attained. There's some that are disappointed, but I always joke, I'm like, what market wouldn't kill for a 6.5% GDP, right? I mean, we're keeping our fingers crossed for 2.5% in the US. So again, I just ask people to keep perspective on the Chinese market. One thing that is changing, though, considerably is the footprint within that market. So we've seen a significant shift in products and a significant shift in market share amongst OEMs. So for those of you that are familiar with the market, last year we saw a 60% growth in SUVs. Right? We also saw very strong growth in MPVs. And the dynamic on the OEM side is starting to change as well. You're starting to see an emergence of the domestic players that are becoming more capable and more to the point have price-sensitive products in those highly popular segments that are driving their market share up. And so that's coming to the disadvantage of some of the European and other established OEMs that are in that market. They're losing share. There's still volume growth opportunities, but they're starting to become more limited because that market's starting to become increasingly competitive, especially with the domestic OEMs. So just some things to keep in mind for China. All right, this is the part where I like to sort of walk us through the world and see what's going on. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about each region. The way that we want to look at this chart, if you can see it okay, this is our contribution to growth. So our assembly forecast from 2015 to 2022. Below each map is their percentage contribution to growth during that period, and then we've got their top line information below. So let's start off with North America. The market's doing well, we all know that. From a production standpoint, we know that a lot of new assemblies coming into Mexico. right? So of that 2.5 million units of growth that we have forecasted, roughly 1.8 million of that is going to come from Mexico. Obviously, that has an impact on the supply chain if we think about the import-export implications of that, which I'll get to here in a few minutes. We also have some pretty strong growth in the U.S. as we have some new plants and capacity expansion opening up. So whatever sales fluctuation we may have in our top-line forecast for the U.S., we still think assembly is going to continue to climb upwards because of that localization. In South America, we know there's not a lot of good news in South America, guys. I'm sorry. There's just not. President Dilma has been removed from office for the next 180 days as they go through the impeachment proceedings. The economy is in free fall right now. Automotive sales are down about 30% year to date. This is on top of the Olympics that are in just a few months. This is not good news because we all know what typically happens post-Olympics, right? There's a pretty big Olympics hangover from an economic standpoint. The Brazilian market peaked in 2012 at 3.6 million units of sales. We're forecasting 2 million units of sales this year, a pretty significant decline in the market. And we don't see that changing in the near term, right? Again, without the benefit of a crystal ball, we take a look at the metrics that we're able to track, and we don't think that we're going to see any significant recovery in that market for at least the next 2 to 3 years. And it'll be a slower recovery at that. So we actually took a considerable amount here over the last 12 to 18 months out of our long-term assumptions for South America. The other markets there, Argentina and Venezuela aren't doing any better either, right? Because Brazil is very much the anchor in that region. The European Union, there is some good news. We do have some good news for the European Union. Sales are up about 8%. I think all of the top 5 markets are up in terms of GDP growth. The consumer sentiment is wavering a little bit. I think everybody is curious to see what happens next month when we have the Brexit vote. I was joking with Louis and some of the team last night. I'm like, what's that going to mean for you guys? Are you going to be welcomed when you try and go into the rest of Europe now, or are they going to make you stand in line like I have to when I go there? I don't know. I guess we'll see. So people are trying to figure out the implications of what the Brexit would ultimately mean, right? The way that we look at that is in terms of free trade agreements and how long it would take to reestablish some of those with the UK, who now enjoys obviously a lot of the free trade agreements that the broader EU has. So yeah, sales are up, and we do see continued assembly growth in that market as well. We do think there will be a slight downturn in that market within our forecast window, probably a year or two after the one that we see in North America, just like there was a lag in the previous downturn. Eastern Europe, again, Russia being the anchor in Eastern Europe, not a lot of good news in Russia either. Peak sales in Russia were back in 2012, 2.9 million units. We're forecasting 1.4 million units this year. So again, if you've heard my comments on Russia before, they really haven't changed much, right? Sort of a double whammy of economic sanctions and low oil prices are just killing the economy there. So while there is some opportunity for that to serve as an export hub down the road, we don't see any significant market rebound, again, for the next 2 to 3 years. Middle East, Africa, some potentially good news there, right? As the sanctions on Iran are gradually lifted, we actually are forecasting significant growth in that region. I think Iranian production last year was around 1.1 million units. We have that nearly doubling by the end of our forecast window to 2 million units. So again, one of the difficult things as an analyst is to try and forecast political unrest, other global events that are very difficult to predict, right? And so these are our baseline assumptions. Obviously, we have upside and downside scenarios built into these, but this is where we stand today. And then we get into Asia Pacific, and I mentioned China already, but also India and Thailand. If we think about the growth markets, right? So if we rank our markets in terms of who's providing the most assembly growth during our forecast window, China's number 1, India is number 2, I believe, and Thailand is number 4. So 3 of the top 4 markets are in developing Asia Pacific. Anybody want to guess who's number 3? Come on. Is it that early? Mexico. Thank you, Louis. Extra credit for you, sir. Okay. So that's driving a lot of the growth. So we said China's, roughly 9 million units of growth. If you add India and Thailand, that's another 4.5, which is essentially all of the growth that we're showing for developing Asia Pacific. And then, as always, the outlier is developed Asia Pacific. We know assembly's going away in Australia. And then in Japan and South Korea, we're seeing a shift in their assembly footprints. And North America is obviously been a huge benefactor of that. So that's sort of what's going on around the world. Hopefully that was a good update for everybody. Okay, can we go back a slide? I think I had a gasoline slide there. That's okay. Well, let me just talk to gasoline on this blank slide then. I'll just hold it on here. So gasoline prices, right? We all know what's going on with oil and gas prices, still at historic lows, although we did see a little bit of a spike here the last few weeks. There's been some unexpected supply disruptions, obviously with the wildfires in Canada. There's some militant groups in Africa that are causing some disruptions. And then Venezuela, just the quality of the oil there is a little lackluster. So that's slowing down the supply. So that's driven prices up. I think oil as it stood as of yesterday was around $47, $48 a barrel, but still nowhere near the high that we saw a few years ago when it was well over $100 a barrel. So, what are the implications for that? Well, I'll talk about the U.S. here in a few minutes, but obviously that's caused a pretty significant shift in segment demand. I already talked about the SUV growth in China, but that's making it extremely difficult for OEMs to meet these long-term, not so long-term now, right? I mean, we're not too far away from 2025 in the U.S. and some of the other global emission standards that are out there. Alternative propulsion vehicles are down double digits year to date in the U.S., despite the fact that the industry is continuing to introduce new nameplates. We've seen some pretty aggressive announcements from certain companies that produce electric vehicles recently. So here's our outlook on it, right? We think that there's going to continue to be very gradual growth unless there's a significant disruption in oil that causes prices to spike, or increased mandates by government regulators that say, you have to sell X number of electric vehicles, right? Until you take away consumers' ability to choose, we just don't see a huge spike in the near to midterm for alternative propulsion vehicles. So we have it at about 8% in 2022, but that includes all alternative propulsion vehicles. That's mild, full hybrids, plug-in, pure electric, and fuel cell vehicles. And a lot of this isn't because programs are going to become mass volume products. It's because you're getting incremental growth all the way up the top line as new nameplates are introduced. We still see, that's still a positive outlook, I would say, and that will continue to grow as you get further out in the forecast window. All right, let me now shift to the U.S. market. I'll talk a little bit about North America as a whole, but U.S. specifically. A little snapshot of how the market's doing to date, right? It's up 3.2%. I mentioned 17.8 million units was our sales target for this year. So we actually think sales growth is going to slow down a little bit in the second half of the year, but we're still well within our model to hit that 17.8 million unit number. But again, what is driving that, right? If you look at the growth, SUVs up 6.7% year to date, pickups up 7.5%, CUVs up 9.1%. And then on the flip side of that, it's really the car segment, the traditional car segment, that's dragging down the top line. Mid-size cars down 3.9%, small cars down 6.3%, and luxury cars down 10.1%. This is because everybody is flocking to crossovers and SUVs. Again, a nice problem to have right now for the industry because these are high margin, high revenue products. So that's great. But it takes away from the longer term goals that we have to meet from an emissions standpoint. The chart on the right shows the production mix. So this is for all North America, and as we're forecasting by body type, right? So if you look at the growth numbers, I'll just walk you through them. The top one there is pickup trucks, going from 2.5 to 3.3 million units. So that's about a 32% growth that we're seeing from the production mix standpoint. And one of the questions that's often asked is, have we hit peak pickup, right? Are we there yet? And I would say the answer is yes on the full-size pickup side. We do have some mid-size pickups that are coming to market that will challenge the traditional stalwarts, right? The Toyota Tacoma, the Chevy Colorado, GMC Canyon, right? So we've got a couple new players that'll be in that segment that we think will push up that top line just a little bit more. But we do think we're nearing a point of peak pickup. The middle one there is sport utility, so that's sport SUVs and crossovers. That production mix is growing by 55% in this 10-year window. So you definitely see where the future is headed. And then the bottom one there is cars, and that's growing by, I think, 15%. Right? And a lot of that is due to localization of product into Mexico. But this market is still dominated by pickups, SUVs, and crossovers. And again, barring some unforeseen instance where oil spikes, that will continue to be the case. And you're noticing, both on the non-lux and luxury side, a whole host of new entrants into those segments, specifically in the crossover side, but also in the SUV and pickup side as well. All right, so here is our sales outlook, and I realize now this chart looks kind of ugly, but the point is that I wanted to just showcase where we were at, right? So we are forecasting, as I said, 17.8 million units for this year. That will be another record year of sales and a record 7th consecutive year of growth. So I don't hear any complaining from people in the audience, right? We often don't appreciate the good times when we have them. In 2008, 2009, those were some tough times. We've had a pretty good sustainable era of success here over the last near decade. So appreciate it now, because we do think that there is another, albeit slight, downturn on the horizon. And I've highlighted there, we think 2018 is our next economic downturn. And again, only defined as consecutive quarters of GDP decline. It doesn't have to be anything drastic like we saw in 2008, 2009. From there, we think we'll recover fairly quickly and level off around the mid 17 million unit range for the remainder of the decade. So the drivers of that recession in 2018 are generally two things, right? It was its increase in auto loan interest rates as the Fed continues to target higher and higher rates for the effective Fed funds rate. And then the second is economic cycles. And so many of you have seen this chart before, but our team tracked all the economic recessions back from 1963 to current. And the bars that are highlighted in red there are the years that there were recessions. So we took a look at the peak to trough decline in automotive sales during each recessionary period. So the last recession was 2008 to 2009, and that was a 38% drop in peak to trough sales, right? We all lived through that. We all know what that's about. We're forecasting about a 4 to 5% peak to trough decline in automotive sales in 2018. So not too big of a deal, and obviously the industry as it stands today is in a much better position to handle any sort of downturn, right? I think most companies have come out and said that we can be profitable even with a SAAR of 10 to 12 million units. So we feel pretty confident this won't have a profound impact on the industry, but again, this is a cyclical industry in terms of sales. We've all seen it before. It will happen again. Okay, so I want to take the last couple minutes and just talk a little bit about disruptors. I mentioned alternative mobility models. I'll get to that in a moment. But one of the things that we've often talked about is the import and export implications, right, as it relates to all the localization of product that we're going to see within the region. I previously had said that we could see an import substitution or a reduction in imports, non-NAFTA imports, by up to 50% by the end of our forecast window. But there were always a couple wild cards that were throwing that projection off. The first was the TransPacific Partnership, right? And this is a slide that I had previously used, and I had 3 bullet points on there. One was reduction of import tariffs, specifically for the Asian OEMs, for the Japanese OEMs, easing of the rule of origin requirements, right, that said you have to have X% of your components come from one of these approved markets. And then the last one was favorable Forex for the Japanese companies. You can see I've crossed that off, right? We all know what's happened the last few months with the yen as the impact of Abenomics has started to cool off. The yen has actually increased about 6% compared to the US dollar over the last year. And so while the Japanese automotive companies and suppliers have enjoyed record profits here over the last few years, they've now provided guidance that said, the next few years could be pretty tough because now the yen exchange rate is less and less favorable. So this gets back to my point of, Forex, there's a lot of volatility in it. You just don't know from a long-term perspective where it's going to end up. And this is why we ultimately think that, people will build where they sell at some point, right? So this will probably mean an accelerated investment by Asian OEMs, specifically Japanese OEMs, in North America to take some of this Forex volatility out of the way. The other wild card is import of Chinese products, and this is a trend that's growing. We have some of the products up there that are currently or will be imported from China, but this could be a massive influx of vehicles that we'll see, and not domestic Chinese brands, but brands that are already existing within this market that see China as the next great, low-cost center, and they're already building significant volumes of products there. So even if you look at the offsets of the cost of the logistics costs and things like that, there's still a significant cost advantage depending on the product. So this is another trend that we're certainly keeping our eye on. So how is the industry adapting, right, to this emergence of auto tech and alternative mobility models, right? So this is something that often gets asked, and honestly, like, nobody knows for sure what the long-term impact is going to be. We live in the world of today, and we have observations on what the industry is doing, and so our observations are as follows, right? We're seeing an increasingly seamless integration across multiple platforms. So I bet if all of us pull out our phones right now, right, I can turn on my car, I can see how many miles I have left before I'm on empty, I can set my home security system, I can watch TV, right, and I can do all of these things increasingly seamless from any of the platforms. That's the goal, that's what consumers want, and the question is, how do we get there? And the industry is starting to do that, right? We have new suppliers entering what has been traditionally the automotive segment, but now is turning towards what we're phrasing as the broader mobility segment. So you've got startup companies that are popping up left and right. You've got suppliers that have been in non-automotive sectors in the past that are now starting to play in the automotive sector. That's causing existing suppliers to have to find those strategic partnerships or make those acquisitions. In fact, last year we saw a record number of automotive M&A deals from a valuation standpoint, by far a record. And our deals team sees that continuing here over the next at least several years as automotive companies and suppliers try and think about what's the future going to be like and where do we need, what tools do we need to compete in this game. So you've seen the auto companies make partnerships with ride-sharing, car-sharing companies, connected car companies, and other suppliers that are out in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. We expect that trend to continue, right? We've always said you can't do it on your own. It's too expensive. I've said that for things like emission standards. So you're seeing strategic partnerships on hybrid transmissions, electric vehicle systems, other fuel efficiency solutions, and so on. Same thing goes with telematics and the connected car. And so the way that we see it down the road is that the ecosystem in which we all currently participate is going to become increasingly crowded and increasingly complex. So understanding which each one of these modules is and where it fits in for everybody else is important to know. And so at PwC, this is sort of the exercise that we continue to go through, right? We're mapping this out, we're trying to understand, we're working with our other sectors to see what their stakeholders are saying so we have a consistent point of view and we can better help our clients. So those are sort of the bookend pieces of it. I hope this stimulates some discussion during the panel talk, but thank you for your attention, and I look forward to speaking with you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brandon. Thank you very much, Brandon. Overall, a positive presentation there. Logistics, by its very nature, is international and pretty global. So the growth globally for the automotive industry looks very positive. Perhaps in the US, just a slight downturn in a couple of years, but let's make the most of it while we can and be prepared for if it does happen. But next up, we're going to be looking at logistics a little bit more, logistics and supply chain, and what will that look like in the future? So I'd like to welcome to the podium Benoit Montreuil, the leader of Supply Chain and Logistics Institute from Georgia Tech. That's one of his many possible job titles, but we selected that one for now. Thanks, Benoit. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go with you on a fast journey for the next 20 minutes, trying to share with you our vision of the physical internet that we're striving to make happen, how it impacts hyper-connected logistics and supply chain across the world, but with kind of a small dive, okay, into the automotive industry to spark questions and potential ideas from you guys as we're going to proceed. So let me go forward. We all know about the digital internet, okay? So this basically what we've been using when you're doing your Wi-Fi, mobile, everything, okay, we're using it quite a lot. When it got started, it was the idea of doing an information superhighway. So which was kind of a logistics transportation type of metaphor. They've succeeded beyond all hopes. Now we're at a position, and I'll express this a little bit more later, where we feel that we need a dramatic change into logistics supply chain to be able to achieve what is expected of such supply chains. So what we're telling is, let's be humble and try to use their metaphor, which is the internet metaphor, to rethink logistics and supply chain. So it will be taking the core ideas that we have with the digital internet, but putting them into practice and on the physical side. So the information highway is going physical. Okay? So when I talk about all this, most of the time people think about moving goods. That's fine. Okay, that's much more than moving the goods. It's moving them, deploying them, so storing them, fulfillment, all that, realizing them, so making them, supplying them, designing them, as well as using them. Here today, I'll be mostly focusing on moving and deployment, okay, and a bit of realization because of the time I have and the focus of this presentation. But just know that we go much beyond. The grand challenge that we're after is to improve by an order of magnitude the economic, environmental, and societal efficiency and sustainability of the way physical objects are moved, deployed, realized, supplied, designed, and used around the world. Okay? We're talking about improving assets utilization, flow consolidation, making so that we can get this fast delivery that people are looking forward and making it very efficient to happen. Let go of greenhouse gas emission, may enable this on a grand scale, and so on. You can read easily on those. So basically we've come up with this notion of a physical internet, which is basically the formal definition. Sorry, it's a bit technical, but that's what you'd get for the digital internet. It's an hyper-connected global system, logistics systems, enabling seamless open asset sharing. When say open here, it's multi-party, multi-company and all that, okay? And the same with flow consolidation through mostly standardized encapsulations of goods, so the way we do packaging and handling, modularization, protocols, and interfaces. When we say hyper-connected, it's because we're gonna connect, okay, on multiple layers. So the physical layer, so that things clicks together, digital, so that we can track things, interact, okay, communicate and all that, decide. Operational, so all our processes, so that all the players in the field understand the same kind of protocols wherever they go and however they play. Business from transaction perspective, legal from all the liability, customs kind of issues, as well interpersonal, because we're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands and millions of people involved in there. So just give you a glance, okay, of what we're talking about. First is opening the market much more for goods transportation, storage, realization, supply, and usage. Encapsulating the goods as much as possible into black box, okay? We're pretty good at doing this in the automotive industry, but most of it right now is focused on a given OEM, given supplier, or a pair OEM supplier in there. You've got some players like CHEP and others, okay, that are trying to make it broader, but it's still very focused. So trying to get this, okay, open, like a data packet in the internet, generic all around the world. And then given that we've succeeded this a bit like we did with the ocean container, okay, where we revolutionized the ports, the ships and the links with railroads, etc. So we say we can transform the handling, transportation, storage technologies to make it much easier. Then again, like I mentioned, standard protocols and interfaces for seamless open asset sharing. It's like right now when we touch something, we say this is bad, okay? Minimize touches. That's why it's like in manufacturing when setup costs are very high, you don't want to change production. But when setup costs get low, then we've got much more potential to do things that right now look absurd to do. Critical mass, we're not talking to just a pair or few OEMs or suppliers working together. We're talking on a massive scale here with certified service provider certifications, rating by users and all that. Continuously tracking and monitoring everything that is flowing in there. So every equivalent of a case, a pallet, or those will be modular containers for us, okay? I'll be tracked continuously all around the world, and all the decision-making capabilities for routing, deployment, production, etc., to support all this. So we're working on introducing the physical internet. In Europe now it has become like the official vision 2030, 2050 for all of Europe for where logistics, supply chains, and freight transportation is going. Okay, so you can read that easily on the web. So that's where we're heading. We're linking with the Internet of Things, which is connecting the objects together, the smart car, connected cars, and everything else that we're talking about here. So we're going to use it for our logistics purposes. And also the energy internet. One of the big trouble with the electric car is just that from an autonomy perspective, we're not smart enough. Okay, the network is not there yet. Okay, so it creates a lot of issues for the people. So all of this will be interconnected. So a little bit of technical, not much, okay, just to make sure you get it, okay. So we're telling that, yes, you've got big roadways, okay, with your modular totes and cages and all that, okay, but we're looking for trying to get something that we cross industry, not just automotive, but all around the world, that'd be easy to handle, store, and transport, so designed for logistics, smart and connected, eco-friendly, etc., would be reusing all the way from plants down the way to the customers around this. So standard modular, reusable, etc., etc. Okay. We're really talking, okay, to make this to work at 3 levels. So transport containers, like going away from the 12 meter, 6 meter, getting down to 4.8, 3.6, 2.4, 1.2. So they got modular Lego blocks, okay, that we're playing. So those you could put on flatbeds, okay, and they can take the rain, the ice, etc. Then you've got the handling containers. Okay, handling containers are basically the same logic, but what we put within dry boxes, basically they would fit into the other one, but again Lego style, again it would all be modular, and all the way down to packaging, okay, individual packaging and preparation for sidelines and things like this. Okay. What we're telling is that what we want is get the handling, storage, transportation technologies to allow this seamless flow, multi-actor, multimodal, making cheap, safe, fast. So meanings we can transform the equipments we're dealing with, to transform the logistics centers, like I'm showing a cross-dock here, where a train will be cross-dock the modular containers to and from trucks, and all this done within an hour or so. We're talking about a cross-dock on the road where you got truck backing up, and within 5 minutes the truck is back on the road. So those are things that are much beyond what we normally do today. So let's try to now change gear and see what is going to change from an operational perspective, from the way we do things. So basically we're showing, by the way, okay, this has been done with work of my students, Kaline Khoury and Raphaël Khoury, who are in the attendance. So I saw this and said, whoop, I was about to forget this. So sorry about that. So basically what we're showing is you got a few suppliers, okay, that are trying to feed some brands, so OEMs, etc. And each one right now is kind of doing it on its own, okay, trying to optimize as best as possible. What we're after is to change the game and say, no, what you do is from the supplier, just ship to the nearest hub, and from that hub it'd be going from hub to hub, but multi-party, multi-suppliers getting to your place. So ultimately, you've got a tote, the equivalent of a tote, that has just gone out of production. You just get it to the nearest hub, and it'll be consolidated with a bunch of others and get there for the price of what we would think now on truckload, or in somewhere between truckload and less than truckload. So reducing this quite a lot. That's what we're after on transportation. On distribution, you've heard about cloud storage, okay, for storing your information, your files on the internet. So we're about the same kind of logic, okay, but now doing it for physical goods, okay. So basically, instead of each one of them having their own logistics center or a warehouse or distribution center, now making sure that we're using much more open DCs, and so that instead of being stuck to use 2 or 3 or 1, now I have access to hundreds of them. Just in the US, we have 500,000 DCs and warehouses available. And most of them are just used by a few players. We can explode that much more. So when we put all the numbers together, okay, I don't have the numbers for the automotive industry yet. That's what we're going to work on. But basically, this is an example in consumer goods industry in France, where we work with Casino, Carrefour, okay, and their top 100 suppliers, model everything that was going flows for months and months around France, and you see what it is on your left side. On the middle side, you have the notion. So we designed, okay, what would be open hub backbone network, okay, with roughly 50 hubs across France, and then they would use it. So you see the simulation as concentrated flows much more. We now can use the railroad much better than we could before in there. And overall, at the end, we end up with over 30% cost reduction for all players and about 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emission. So we did roughly the same kind of study, but at more aggregate level for companies that have to serve like the North American market. And basically, as we go from dedicated to collaborative, so just a few players together, and then to hyper-connected, like I explained, we're getting down to about 1/3 of the cost is cut down there. So, and then the same we did with moving the goods, the storing, deploying the goods, we can do with production, okay? Basically, 2 things that are easy to explain in short time is one is that it's much easier to transmit information about a good and than rather transporting the good. So every time I can make the good nearby to customers, okay, to point of use, it's much better if I can do it efficiently. The technology that exemplifying this, okay, this has many people dreaming, is the 3D printing. Okay, so it's starting very small, but it's growing and it will have effect. Okay, so we're going to ship the drawing for our parts, okay, and the right basic materials, and it's going to be printed for us, okay, nearby point of views. We're far from large-scale implementation, but that exemplifies that. For most people, though, it's more about something like this, okay? So on the upper left corner for you, okay, you've got a company that does most of the production assembly and then tries to serve the market from there. And then it says, okay, I can separate my assembly from production and get there. That's intra-company, that's going down. But then what we're after is the same way we have open DCs and all that, can we do it with open assemblers, open production units, so that you're, as automakers, you're basically orchestrating a network, an open network of certified fabs, okay, helping you do this. And the idea is, think about what we've mentioned. We can look at it from the OEM perspective, but then we can think about it, okay, from the multi-tier perspective. When your tier 1, tier 2 suppliers can play the kind of games that I'm expressing here, it makes a huge world of difference. So basically what we're after is getting from the old way, which was atomistic, everybody thinks about this little part, to right now we are in the integrated era mostly, where we're end-to-end supply chain trying to control big DCs, big factories, centralized. But this is very much asset intensive, and it's bounding. You're never big enough to make it. So the best one, sorry about the graphics, okay, the names, we're now in the collaborative era, where the top players like here in automotive, Hyundai, Kia, and then you had Mercedes with Nissan and all that, making investment so that they're going to collaborate, economy of scale, scope, greener, etc. Trouble with this is it's long to deal, tough to adapt, and hard to scale. So that's basically why we try to leapfrog to the hyper-connected era. So a bit like what happened with the phone system, going to the cellular type of phone approach. This week, Mercedes, okay, I said, what's happening what's the link with us here? Okay? Well, the first thread is basically the going to hyper-connected vehicles and transportation systems. It's been alluded by my colleague before. Well, this week Mercedes just put a paper online, okay, where they've got nice graphics that basically shows that physical internet is part of the way Mercedes is thinking about the future of its vehicles and the transportation systems and all that. So that's one trend. That's not the thread that I'm going to explore in this presentation, but that's clearly one thread for the automotive industry. Okay. What I'm going to look a bit more in the last 5 minutes is basically talking about what would mean in the industry, and I'm focusing here on the US and the Southeast industry as an example. So basically, we have a pretty big footprint, okay, mostly on the Midwest, okay, going south, and we see also Mexico developing. We got Tesla on the other side, okay, so it's growing, but we have a lot of suppliers, a lot of automakers that are present. But basically for us, the problem is that it's mostly disconnected. It's just linked from 1 to 1 or 2 to 1, etc., but very little open consolidation involved. Okay, in our region here, okay, so we've had a huge growth of automotive automakers in the last decades, and it's been growing and growing. So we have many suppliers coming in, okay, many car makers. But again, when you look at it, it looks nice. But this is almost entirely disconnected. So the Mercedes plants supply all their stuff independently, and the other ones will do the same, etc. So there's a lot of use, okay, a lot of potential for much better asset sharing and much better flow consolidation across the industry. First, okay, is I mentioned the notion of the totes and the carts, etc. that we're using. They're specially made. Sometimes it's just designed for that specific supplier. It's not going to work for any others. What we're after is trying to make it so that they're going to be externally at least as generic as possible. And that's for example, from the Mercedes example, where you see a truck here with mother containers on it, okay, that are going to be used, okay, from many players in there. So, but in the region, okay, this is just schematic, just to have you thought, okay, rapidly. But basically what we're telling is we know where the ports are, we know that parts are getting from Mexico, from the north, etc. But can we map a series of hubs, okay, that be automotive friendly, okay, very nicely, where truck drivers could drive like 4 or 5 hours, get to the hub, make transfer in connection, so that when you travel along those edges, you're fully loaded, okay, and it's very efficient to get your stuff in. So this is really working on the flow perspective, okay? The other perspective is, can we develop and put in place open DCs where multi-suppliers, okay, can feed specific OEM, but more like several OEMs in a specific zone, so that it can be fast gear, share this, and not to have to invest each one on their own stuff. So doing the hyper-connected distribution that we've been talking about, okay? Also, we can look at it. There's a lot of issues related to imports, for example. So I'm going to show an example with Europe. So we got, for example, several automakers from Germany nearby. So we've got a lot of flow associated with it. So basically, the kind of concept when we apply what we're talking about is right now each one will get its production, gets to the DC of either the supplier or the OEM, try to get it to the US here, and then ship it by itself, okay, to get to the plant. What we're after is interconnect this, okay, so that ultimately the production that you do in a given part supply plant in Germany is shipped daily, what has been produced daily, needed for the specific plant. Right now it costs a fortune, but when you do it multi-supplier, multi-OEMs, okay, then it begins to make a lot of sense to make this happen. So that's basically the kind of logic that we're after, okay, which is basically use the same type of things that I've mentioned in the US, okay, do within Germany, but then consolidate, get it to a place like Savannah or whatever, okay, and then, okay, use what I've explained earlier to get to the specific plants, but on a much more fluid perspective than we're now doing. Ultimately, okay, we've seen little parts of this going on, okay, but ultimately, what he was mentioning is produce where your clients are, where the markets are. What we say is the potential of hyperconnecting production, so having plants that are capable of doing vehicles from one and more manufacturers. But there's some of this, but going at grand scale is not tomorrow morning. But from concept perspective, okay, it has to be taught. So this will require a lot of innovation, okay? Talking process innovation, techno innovation, eventually infrastructure innovation. The most important for me are cultural innovation. You think that I'm daydreaming, I'm smoking too much pot, or that I'm a professor in ivory tower, etc. While this is happening, you say, this is not going to happen in my living life, okay, so no way, okay, so we have to break down. This is mental model paradigms, etc. On the business side is, am I going to make business in there? I'm a logistic provider. Am I going to work in there? I'm CHEP. I'm going to play. I'm Mercedes, GM, Ford, whatever, okay? Am I going to play this game? So it has to be retaught. And also innovation, legislative-wise, we need to have the laws to help us, okay? So overall, there's a lot of research, innovations, okay, in the field, in academia need to be done. 4-axis very rapidly on conceptual design and functional design. I just draw a rough brush, okay? We can do much more at building the vision, the roadmaps, how it's going to work, etc. Then the need also, like we did in France for consumer goods, is what is the real assessment of efficiency, sustainability, capabilities, do analytics, optimization, simulation to get a rough number that we can play with. Then an engineering solution, why can't we do it just tomorrow, okay? So what's needed? So hard, like containers, but also business model, decision models, digital platforms, etc. to make this happen. And fourth, very important, do case studies, do field pilot, test it, and check if it would make sense or not, and get to grow to scalability eventually. On this, questions, comments are welcome. Just to note that we're actually shaping projects, okay, in this arena. So if any of you are interested, we'd be more than welcome to talk with you. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Benoit. Very interesting presentation and on how automotive, logistics in general, but also automotive logistics is going to look in the future. More hyper-connected, I like that word. I was also impressed by one of your slides that had us looking at Wi-Fi or the 6G connectivity. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm struggling with trying to get 3G over here, so I'm looking forward to the 6G as well. So we've heard a presentation about potential sales and production forecasts from Brandon, from PwC. Mostly good news, but some potential little hiccups here and there. We've also heard about the future of automotive logistics and see where you are in this loop. We haven't got so much time left, but there's always time for some questions from the audience. Again, the usual rules apply. You can raise your hand, wait for the microphone to come, then say your name and your company name, and then you can ask the question or make your comment. I don't know if anyone has any questions to begin with. Okay, a couple of questions from my side. Firstly, for Brandon, one of the mistakes I made here is what I normally do when I'm writing notes to ask questions. I normally put the initials down, so I put BM for Brandon Mason. Unfortunately, I put BM for Benoit as well, so I don't know that one. So if I ask you the wrong questions, please understand. Brandon, we talked about expanding production in Mexico, but is that going to be a problem? Is there going to be overproduction when perhaps the 2018 downturn or even the leveling out of sales in North America? Do you think we're going to have too much production and not enough cars being sold? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. Right now, imports, non-NAFTA imports account for about 3.6 million units. So when that import substitution comes in, even if you've got a downturn, you know, the logic there is, yeah, I mean, at some point there'll probably be some plants that are less than 100% utilized, and we're lucky in North America right now that we have plants running at in excess of 90%. I think that's the average. So you've got some plants that are running 110, 115% utilization. So yeah, we certainly run that risk, but again, with the way the industry has positioned itself right now in North America, even a small dip in utilization isn't going to hurt them anything considerably. So.
Okay. For Benoit, one of your last slides, you talked about the cultural change that needs to happen. I'm not sure that the automotive logistics is great at collaboration. How important is collaboration between the different sectors, whether it's car makers and car makers, or car makers and logistics service providers? How important was that in your examples that you used from France for improving their networks and the hyper connectivity?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We have had so many conversations and discussions on this, and the notion is that, like in 1994, we wrote a book on the network enterprise. Okay, it was all about collaboration. Okay, you do something, you have it done, you do it together with others, or you don't do it. So we've done a lot of work on this. But through the years, what I've found out is that it's very demanding. Okay, there are so many aspects that hurt collaboration, that make it difficult to make happen, to make it grow. Like we talk about collaborative, but how many times have you seen collaborations that go beyond 3, 5, 10 companies that stand on long run? They're rare. Okay, this is a tough deal to make happen. So what we're after with the hyper-connected version is for you to cooperate without having to sign all those strategic agreements. Okay? It's like you go in public transit. Okay, you just don't sign a strategic agreement with Marta, and you don't mind if you've got somebody from your competitor that is sitting in the bench near you. It just doesn't make sense to ask this. It's like I will not take this air flight because I'm with Coke and there's a Pepsi guy in the airplane. Okay, it just does not make any sense. Okay, so that's what we're eventually targeting. So at the extreme, okay, we don't have this notion of explicit collaboration like we're doing now, okay, this heavy-duty collaboration. Well, now this said, when we're trying to make this happen, then, okay, we need some level of collaborations, because we need some players that are going to come up front and say, we want to work on this, and obviously if we're going to work on this, I just can't have the OEM, I just can't have the Magna and the suppliers, I just can't do it with the logistic transportation providers or the CHEP of this world, etc. It's not going to work. So we need, okay, a representative set that will say, we'll do competition a bit later, but allow pre-competitiveness. Let's look at this and try to make sense from a cross-industry perspective. At this level, yes, there's going to be need for collaboration, but it can fly pretty fast. Okay, like in France right now, there's a new venture that just won the King of the Supply Chain Award, and basically what I've explained with putting the hubs, the open hubs, that's what they've started. South of France first, southeast of France, started with one. They're already making success, proving that they save greenhouse gas, saving money. They've got a bunch of clients. Now they're climbing, and within a year, they're going to have like 12 to 15 across the country. Okay? So the early start, yes, FM Logistics was put in there. They signed agreements with some of the key players so that they would have a critical mass. But the notion from the start is not to have a closed group, but to have something quite open. So I'm trying to, it's a long answer, sorry, but it's a very profound one, and people are scared of that one because they're so scared of the past history with collaboration. That's why when I showed atomistic, integrated, collaborative, I say hyper-connected, we have to go beyond this because it's too heavy duty to make happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Question at the front here, please. Again, name and company name, please.
Mike Carver, Delaware Technology Group. You hear this? Question for Benoit.
There we go. That works. You just mentioned that Mercedes announced the physical internet is key to its future, given that Mercedes is here in Atlanta. Do you have any idea specifically what we will see Mercedes and when?
Honestly, no, okay, this is brand new, okay, so this just been put out this week, okay, we're making the connections. We have nice projects with Mercedes right now. We have 2 projects going on with Mercedes, but they're mostly still internally oriented, trying to help them there. But clearly, we're in the thread of making those connections. So hopefully next time I come, okay, we'll be able to talk much more of those on those issues. But basically, when you read what they've talked, okay, influence on the design of their vehicles, okay. So to rethink, okay. So when you begin to think vehicles that are gonna be along the line, so you want to be able to do this easy, okay, easy load and unload of modular containers. You want them to be connected. You want to, there's a bunch of the sizes you're talking about, they're going to work, okay, interacting with the handling facilities, the transit facilities within the transportation system. All this is important, okay. So for example, we talk often about crowdsourced delivery, Uber, okay, but for freight, okay. Well, like I was talking with people at Renault recently, okay, and basically when they're thinking about their light trucks now, they're telling, wow, let's think those ideas, how we design our light trucks to make this happen. So I see a lot of potential along those lines, but understanding what I've talked to them about, I would expect that and that them and many other companies will go beyond, okay, just the vehicle itself, but thinking it's going to work as a transportation system and how they're going to interact with the rest. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. That's why we talk about hyper-connected. But that's the most I can say right now. I'd love to tell you more, but
okay. We'll talk afterwards.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, one more question from me for Benoit. It's kind of similar, I guess, but who should lead these changes? Is it in this instance the car maker? Was it Carrefour who led the change there? Was it the logistics service providers? Was it an outsider? Was it a consultant coming in and forcing these changes? What led to the changes and what will lead to these changes? Who will lead them?
Okay. When I talk with about the physical internet and people tell me, is it going to happen? Can it happen? I just tell them that if 12 companies around the world, I pick them very carefully, okay, would say it's a go, then it's done. We're not putting somebody on Jupiter or something like this, or building a city that few kilometers down the ocean. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. Just moving, storing, deploying stuff around the world. Okay, so it's no big deal. All the technology I'm talking about, we can do within 5-10 years max, and it's all done. Okay, the trouble is not at that level. So clearly, leadership, it's interesting to manage. I'm not still understanding completely enough the automotive industry to mention it, okay? But I'll tell you, if I look like, I'll make a contrast with the consumer good industry. Big leaders right now will be Amazon, okay? Amazon just drives the show right now in many ways, okay? I got all the retailers like Walmart working at improving. If those guys decide it's going to shift, it's going to shift, okay? And manufacturers like Procter & Gamble and others are very keen on shifting, on helping, leading this, etc. Then when you go with the third-party logistic providers, many of my discussions end up being along the lines as follows, okay? When the clients are going to ask me, I'm going to just go full breast on it, okay? But they're going to be kind of reactive. But I've got a few that I want to lead, and that's where we're talking. Those are talking about. An interesting other source of leadership comes from the companies that do kind of digital platforms, okay, trying to consolidate, help companies to do routing, consolidate shipment, and all that. Those have access to many clients and suppliers and providers, and they're in a very keen position to make that kind of thing happen. So again, leadership from those. If I go in the automotive industry, clearly the car makers have a huge say to do. But I think the Magnas of this world, okay, also have important in all the key players that are currently serving the logistics and transportation, that domain will have impact. And let's not forget, very important, all the material handling and storage technology type of companies can be helped. But those will come when the other ones will tell them, okay, listen, we're moving there, and if you don't follow us, you're going to become dinosaurs. Okay? So then they'll be shaken and moving and helping quite a lot.
Thank you. Any questions?
Hi, Christopher Ludwig, Automotive Logistics. Another question for Benoit. I'm not that familiar with the consumer goods side of it, but is Amazon moving in any direction like that? Because aren't they kind of doing the opposite, kind of starting to create their own logistics kind of dedicated networks? So in some sense, is this a sign that they're moving away from that?
Yeah, that's a very... For a long time, I was along your lines, okay? I say Amazon tries to create what I'm talking about, but within Amazon, okay? So that was my talk, okay? I can say it, I've told it many times. I have to change my mind, okay? I had to change my mind a few months ago because we think of Amazon as a single company, but in fact, it's a lot of business units interacting and there's a lot happening. And they have Amazon Fulfillment, okay, which is used to be, you get your stuff in there and you can store it in any of our fulfillment center as long as you sell on Amazon. They've now opened it, okay? Now you can store anywhere you want there, but sell on any platform you want, okay? We're pretty near to hyper-connected distribution, okay? So it's like your Google Drive or your Microsoft, your Apple iCloud or whatever, it becomes like the Amazon iCloud, if you want, okay, for physical stuff. It's not perfect, but they've had a drastic change, okay? So I think that they're pushing so much, okay, for like a very fast delivery, a few hours, okay? They're thinking about drones. Are you gonna have drones from every darn company flying above your top? It just does not make any sense, okay? So the kind of stuff that we're talking about would have a set of drones that would be around a locality. You'd bring your stuff nearby, or it could be mobile trucks, but you'll have to interconnect all that stuff. So those guys, as they explore making this happen, and they're very serious about that kind of stuff, okay, then they'll have to move on those directions. The city logistics challenge, last mile delivery, is a huge, huge challenge that will require a lot of smart solutions. And they are leading, they are among the big leaders there, and clearly they are thinking about those stuff. I've been talking with several people at Amazon recently, and can tell you it's changing.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the time's up, really. We've already overrun about 5 or 6 minutes. So I'd just like to thank the panel for giving us a very good and interesting start to the conference, and I think a lot of talking points that we can continue with over the next couple of days. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Pleasure. Thank you. Great job.
Please join us for the coffee breaks in the exhibition area, which is hosted by Sergère. Visit the stands and enjoy your network. Yeah. And we'll be back here at 11 o'clock. Thank you.